In Gimel Amid Beis, we're starting from Hakaitzer. Hakaitzer is about 12 lines from the bottom. 13 lines from the bottom. One of the malachas was harvesting grain. It's the third of the malachas. Sowing, plowing, and harvesting. The Gemara says, Tana was taught in the Brisa. Hakaitzer, harvesting grain. Habaitzer. Baitzer is grapes. Taking grapes. Vagaider is harvesting dates. Vamasik is harvesting olives. Va'ira is harvesting figs. Kula malachachas. It's all considered one malacha. It's all harvesting. Doesn't matter which fruit or which how it's done. It's the same point. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, Haman deshada pisa ledikla. Someone throws a clod of earth against a palm tree. Va'asar tamri, and it removes the dates from the tree. Gave a big bang against the tree. So chayev shtaim is chayev two karbanos, two chatois. Achas mishum teilis, v'achas mishum mefarek. One is because of teilish. He removed something from the tree. Doesn't tell us kaitzer, but that's the idea. V'achas mishum mefarek, and then there's also mefarek. Now, mefarek is a complicated in the Rishonim. What exactly mefarek is? Rashi starts off saying mefarek is a tolda of dash. What is dash? Dash means to thresh. What happens is you have the grain inside a husk or inside, so you have to crack it. You thresh it, you crack it off. Let's say you would have peanuts. Normally you eat one at a time. You open it up and you take out the things. If you have doing this commercially, so you crush the whole thing, you spread them out, you crush everything, and then somehow you got to separate them. So you winnow, you throw it in the air, and you blow away all the chaff with the wind or whatever, and then only the hard pieces, the kernels, will fall down. So that's the more efficient way of doing it. So mefarek is a tolda of dash of taking out the grains from what it's held in. Over here, what would it mean? You got it off the tree. That's teilish. When it falls and hits the ground, it falls out of its whatever is containing the dates. They're held on to these things. It's called brooms, or machbedes. It's called. It's just what holds the dates inside the. What it keeps a little protection over the dates. Seems like Tosfos has a different version of Rashi. In his version, it says that mefarek is taking them off the tree as well. He doesn't accept that. It says shemefarek ilan mimasoi min aperish shalav. You're unloading, like unloading a donkey from its load. So you're unloading the tree from its load. That's what mefarek is, the way the Tosfos understands Rashi. But then he gives another pshat, which is actually the pshat that Rashi seems to say. Okay. Ravashi says you're potter from both of these. He argues on Rav Papa. He says, Ein derech tlisha bekach, vein derech brika bekach. This is all considered kalacher yad. It's all kalach yad means you're done in a backhanded manner, atypical manner, a non-typical manner. So therefore,
does kavana come into this? What was his intention?
That definitely comes in, but because his intention was to do this, and nevertheless, if it was done in a backhanded way, he's pater. Okay. Ma'amer is gathering and bundling together. bundling together. So Amar Rava, Haiman the Kanef Milcha mi Milcha Sechayev. Rava says that it happens to be that if someone gathers the salt from the salt, what's it called? Where they let the water flow into these little plates, and then they evaporate it, and then they collect all the salt. So it's not from a mine; it's from the sea.
Those are pools, little flat pools.
Yeah, little pools. So that's also ma'amer. That's also gathering. He says, "Chai mishum ma'amer." You're gathering and you're bundling. So Abaye Amar Eini Merel Bigdule Karka. Abaye argues on this. He says that Imar is bundling is only with things that grow from the ground. Oh, I forgot. I wanted to tell you this Tosfos on Mefarek. Mefarek has these complications. Anyway, the problem is there's a Gemara that says that if someone milks an animal, he's chayiv because of Mefarek. Now, Rashi says Mefarek is a tolda of dash, of threshing. The problem is I have another Gemara that says dash is only by gedule karka, it's only by things that grow from the ground. So how do I have a tolda of dash on milking a cow or a goat, whatever? It doesn't grow from the ground. So Tosfos says, don't answer me that cows also grow from the ground because they eat what grows from the ground. That's not a good answer for this, even though sometimes the Gemara does use that, but over here it's not going to work. So therefore, Rabbi Natam says that mefarek has to do with memachik. Machik means making things smooth. What happens is when the udder is full of milk, so it's bulging, and when you take the milk out, it gets flat. It flattens it out, so it like smooths it out. So the Ri argues on Rabbi Natam. Says 1 second. The Gemara says that there's a difference between if you milk the animal into food or if you milk it into a container. That means, is it becoming a liquid or is it just getting absorbed into a solid? So if it has to do with the udder, if the tolda is smoothing out the udder, then what does it have to do with where the milk falls? It must be that it has to do with the product, not with the udder. So anyway, that's where it leaves off this discussion about mefarek. When it comes to ma'amer, we have the same thing, that ma'amer is also only by gedule karka, according to Abaye. And so therefore it won't apply to salt, at least midaraisa. It may be a rabbinic. Now ma'amer is only in the place where it grows. If you have, let's say you have a big bowl of oranges, mangoes, whatever, you have it in the kitchen, it spills out. So someone goes along and puts them back into the bowl. Sees ma'amer. He put them into a bowl. So it says ma'amer is only in the place where it grows. Ma'amer is not in your kitchen. In the field, that would be ma'amer. I had a question. There's a certain tree here that has a purple berry. Anyway, they fall down, they turn the sidewalk purple and everything. Maybe called the June plum. Anyway, I saw someone once on Shabbos sweeping them together. I said, I don't know if that's ma'amer. They said, no, my rabbi said it's not. So, but I don't know. It's the place that it grows. And it's right under the tree. And he's sweeping them. The rabbi, maybe, if it's correct that the rabbi said it's not, maybe because he was sweeping them to throw them out. Maybe that's not considered ma'amer. Putting them in a pile, collecting them together would be ma'amer when you want to save them. Maybe, I don't know if that's the halach. Okay, that's ma'amer. V'hadash is threshing. Tana hadash, v'hamanapit, kula malacha achasein. We're putting things into categories here because we have 39 malachas. What are the details of these malachas? What categories do they go into? So we say that threshing, which is done with grain, manapitz is flax, beating the flax. And takes out there's pieces in there that you don't want to get the linen. Vahamenafet is banging the cotton to get the seeds out. I don't know how a gin works, but I assume that that's in place of a gin. All of that is one malacha. It's the same purpose. Okay, hazayra va'bayr va'teichen va'meraket. Winnowing, selecting, grinding, and sifting. That's a quote from the Mishnah. The Gemara asks right away, Hainu zayra, hainu bayra, hainu meraket. Winnowing is doing what? Separating the seeds from the chaff. It's done with the wind. Bayra is taking the seeds out by hand. It's taking the bad pieces, the little pebbles out by hand, because the pebbles would fall down after the winnowing. And meraket is sifting, is also, you're separating the hard pieces, the thicker flour, from the fine flour that comes out. It's all the same malacha. It's separating. Abaya v'rava d'amrit harvayu. So the Gemara's question is, why do I have three malachas that are exactly the same function? So Abaya v'rava d'amrit harvayu kol milsa david mishkan. Abaya v'rava both say anything that was in the Mishkan. Afagav di'ika the damila, even though there are other malachas that are similar to it, similar function. Chashavla. So we count it because it was in the Mishkan. That was something that was done in the Mishkan, so we do it over here also. So we count it in our list of malachas. The Gemara says, well, if that's what you're going to say, then v'lei chashav nami kaitish. What about pounding? When they would make the dyes in the Mishkan, they would pound the, whatever it is, little berries or herbs, things, they would pound it to take off the outer shell. And granted, that's dash. But dash is done differently. Dash is usually done, you put it on the floor, you put a board over it, and you let the animal walk on it. And it like crushes the grains. So this is done a little different, but whatever the case is, this is, you pound it with probably a pestle, whatever. So why don't we count that one? So Amar Abaya says, "Kein ani oichel pite b'lei katisha." Well, yeah, exactly, Professor. You pound it with something like that. Now, he says that the poor person doesn't do this, doesn't pound his grain. I guess that there's ways of getting off the bran or the chaff and all of that, and it would be more perfect if you would do the pounding, but the poor person doesn't need it so perfect, so he doesn't do it, and therefore we don't count it. Rashi goes in to explain what the Gemara is going to say, that the first 11 malachas is called Sidura de Pas, the order of making bread. So if it didn't go into the normal process of making bread, that also wasn't put in. We have different criteria of the malachas that get put in. Had to be important in the Mishkan. And then it gets replaced for how it works out with the order of making bread. Okay. Taisus asks, okay, granted, when it comes to the bread, the poor man doesn't care about it. But what about when it comes to making the dyes? In the dyes, this was the regular process for making the coloring, the ink and the dyes. So Taisus answers that the poor man doesn't care about this when he makes the dyes either. He'll make the dyes without this pounding. So Taisus asks, what about sifting the flour? Sifting the flour is more of a refinement that was done for the wealthy people. The poor man could use the coarse flour as well. So Taisa says, well, most of them don't. Most of them will also sift the flour. Okay, so we're getting into these little little details over here of which one gets counted and which one not. Rava says, Rava Amar Hamani Rebbe Hidam Rava's Malachs Arbaim Chasar Achas. V'chashav Kaitish Havali Arbaim. Rava says that we have a biblical source, according to Rebbe, of how many malachas there needs to be. So it's not just that, there's a reason why we didn't count it, but we actually can't count it because we can't add any malachas. We can't say that there's another malacha here because Rebbe learns from a pasuk Hadvarim, Dvarim Hadvarim, that needs to be exactly 39. So the Gemara said, well, that's not an issue to us because you just said that you repeated 3. You had winnowing and selecting and sifting, and all of those is repetitious. It's the same. So you could take one of those out and put in pounding, and that would be okay. I know it's similar to dash, but so what? 2 and 2 is 2. You have 2 with selecting, 2 of separating, and you have 2 of threshing, and that would fit better. We have to say like Abaya. Abaya's answer was that a poor person doesn't do this when he makes his bread, so that's why we left it out as well. So even if you accept this from Rava, that we can't adjust the number, but we still need to come onto Abaya to explain why we did this and not that. Okay. This is the sugi of Beirer, at least in Hilchos Shabbos. It's slightly more complex in Hilchos Yom Tov. But in Hilchos Shabbos, Beirer has 3 rules. Anyone know the rules? The Beirer rules? It's for immediate use. When are you allowed to select? It needs to be for whatever you're doing. It needs to be for immediate use. You can't do it for later in the day, and definitely not for tomorrow. That's a different issue. It needs to be immediate use. How long is immediate use? Well, before the meal, or like for immediate. It has to be done by hand. You can't use any tool that does selecting. For example, a strainer, or even a spoon that has holes in it would be considered a strainer, that you can't use those. For salad, where the liquid would drip out. And it needs to be that you're taking the good from the bad, not the bad out of the good, which means you take what you want. So you can use, let's say, a spoon, regular spoon, not a straining spoon, but you can take a spoon to take salad, or the piece of the salad that you want, even though you didn't want that other piece. You're taking the good from the bad and you're putting it into your plate, you're going to take it. So you didn't do it by hand, but you used the utensil that's considered it's not a tool. Utensil over here, it's a selecting utensil. You can't use a selecting utensil. Okay, so this Gemara that we're going to learn here is going to go through, ultimately we'll come out with those 3 rules. It's the good from the bad, miyad, and biyad. Immediate and by hand. So Taner Rabbanan, Usad and Abraisa, Hayelafan of Mina Yoichlan. There's in front of him, there's different foods. Bayer va'echel bayer miniach. He selects and he eats, and he selects and he leaves. So far, so good. I see so far that he's allowed to eat by selecting. He's leaving something in there, but he's allowed to eat. But he shouldn't select. It's like a riddle. And if he does select chayiv chatas, then he's chayiv chatas. So there's something wrong with this brisa. It's very, very vague, ambiguous. What does it mean? It's contradictory. Maika Amar, the Gemara asks. We'll have several Amiraim here that will give suggestions. So Amar Ula, the traveler, he says, Hachi Kamar, Bayer va'echel baybayim. If it's for that day, then you're allowed to select and you can eat it. And you can select and you can put aside if it's for that day. That means, I don't know what miniach is. You're putting it aside. However, ulamachar la yiver. But for tomorrow, you shouldn't do bayr. The imbir chayiv chatas. And if you did bayr for tomorrow, then you're chayiv chatas. That's what he explains. That's what the brisa means. Maskefler of Chizda. Rav Chizda says, it's like a sarcastic question. Are you allowed to bake bread for tomorrow, for that day? For that day, it's mutter. You think the whole you think malachas of Shabbos are only for tomorrow, but if you're doing it for Shabbos, it's acceptable? Elam Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda has to give his own suggestion. What does the brisa mean? When it says Bayer Va'ichel, it means that it's less than the shear of Breira. I don't know what the shear is. Maybe it's a Gregors. Yeah, it must be a Gregors. But the malachas of, Rashi says Gregors. The malachas of Shabbos that are associated with food are Gregors, are the size of a fig. So you're allowed to be Bayer less than the size of a fig. Bayer Miniach Pachis Mikashir. You can select and leave it if it's less than the size. But if it's more than a fig, don't do bayr. And if you do, there's chayiv chatas. Maskefler of Yosef asked Rav Chizda. So you're telling me I'm allowed to bake less than a shear. I know that there's no chiyuv, there's no punishment less than a shear. It's called a chatzi shear, but nevertheless, chatzi shear aser min haTorah. That's machlekes Rabbi and Rish Lakish. We hold that it's aser. Elam Rabbi Yosef, so Rabbi Yosef offers his own suggestion. What's the meaning of the brisa? Bayer va'eichel biyad, bayer miniach biyad. Okay, we're getting into one of the rules of bayer, of selecting. It says you can do it by hand. B'knain v'tamchei. Knain and tamchei are types of bowls and plates. La yiver, you shouldn't use them to select. You would spread things out on this big plate, and then you'd have to select it, or maybe shake it off or something. The imbirer, that would be the issue. And if you do, then you're pater avalasser. That's a problem. That plate and bowl, a basket maybe, is not made for selecting. But you're using it for selecting. So that's pater avalasser. Enough of a kvara, if you use a sifter or a sieve, lo yivrer. That you're not allowed to use for sure. And if you use one of those tools that are made specifically for selecting, for separating, then you chayiv chatas. In the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos last week, we had different types of students that study. One of them was someone that keeps the fine flour, and he lets out the coarse flour. And it's very unclear what machine that is that does that. Any type of sifter is always going to let out what's smaller, not what's more coarse. Not what's more coarse. Is there a machine that only lets out the coarse? A regular sifter, you sift, and what's fine, the finer flour will fall through the holes. And what's not good will stay inside. So it's very unclear, that Mishnah, what it means, what's the what tool it's using. I know the intention, but what tool is it does that? What mechanism? What machine that is that holds in the fine flour? Over here, you can't use a sifter on Shabbos, and if you do, you chayiv chatas. If you use any other machine, any other tool to do this, that's not made for sifting, so then it's pater avalas. And if you do it by hand, it's mutter. That's Rabbi Yosef.
The machine is called Brunwa Yeshiva.
Here, it keeps the best. Maskefla, where's Yossi? Maskefla Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna has a question. He's asking to Rabbi Yosef. How do you get that out of this brisa? You added in details that the brisa doesn't mention at all, and there's no reference to that. Ella Amar Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna then says his own suggestion. Boirer va'eichel eichel mitach pselas. Boirer va'eichel means that you can take the good from the bad. It's another one of the rules. that's going to be accepted. If you notice here in our Gemaras, Rabbi Yosef told us, Bar v'eichel biyad. If you notice, if you look, there's a little letter there that's an aleph. That's a reference to the Ein Mishpat that tells us where to look it up in Shulchan Aruch. That means that where that small aleph is, that tells me that's going to be quoted in Shulchan Aruch. So Rabbi Yosef's din is quoted in Shulchan Aruch. Rav Hamnuna's din is quoted in Shulchan Aruch. That I can select the good from the bad. I can even put it separate and put it aside. I don't think that's the halacha. The good from the bad. However, but the bad from the good, that you're not let us stuck. And if you do, it's chayiv chatas. Maskefla Abaya. Abaya asks to Rav Hamnuna, does it actually say by miniach? It says that you're taking the good from the bad. It doesn't say you're taking the good from the bad. You notice now we have another note, another reference. You can select and eat for immediate use. You can select and leave it for immediate use. But if it's for later in the day, you shouldn't do selecting. And if you do, that's considered like you're selecting for storage, and that's the original malacha of selecting. And that's what would be chayiv chatas, even if it's just for later in the day. Amrur Rabbanan Kamei de Rava. The rabbi said Abaya's pshat in front of Rava. Amalu Shaper Amar Nachmeni. I'm curious if Eily says have Rabba. My Gemara says Rava, but whoever it is, he says Nachmeni said well. Now I know Rabba called Abaya Nachmeni. I didn't know Rava called Abaya Nachmeni. So I am just surprised at this. He says Nachmeni gave a good pshat. Abaya gave a good pshat. Nachmeni is either that was his actual name, Nachmeni, or his name was actually Abaya and he was called Nachmeni. Whatever the case is, he has an alias. Okay. Hayu lefanov shnei mini oichlem. There's two types of food in front of him. Ubir v'achal bir v'niach. He selected and he ate, and he selected and he left. Rav Ashi masni pater, Rav Yomi midifni masni chayev. We have two opinions. One says pater, one says chayev. Rav Ashi says pater. Rav Ashi masni pater, Rav Ashi says pater, v'hatani chayev. What about our brisa that we quoted at the top of the page? We made a big discussion over this brisa. It says that the brisa said, V'mbir chayev chatas. So the Gemara answers like kasha b'knei metamche b'nafel kvar. You see, Abaya, I'm sorry, Rav Ashi didn't give us a mutter. He just said pater. Which case is pater? That we left out in the explanation of here. In Abaya's explanation, he says if you select for later on, that's as if you selected for storage and Yechayiv Chatas, but there was no pater. Rav Ashi comes along and says pater. So where's the pater? So he says the pater is if you didn't use a tool that's made for selecting. You used a tool that's not made for selecting, but you used it to select. Yeah. So you're going to ask, so why are you allowed to use a fork to eat the parts of the food on your plate that you're allowed to use? You're using a utensil. It's not made for selecting, but it's a utensil that's used. And the answer is that any tool that's made just not to get your fingers dirty is not considered a selecting tool. It's not considered a tool. It's not considered a tool. It's just an extension of your hand. What is a tool is something where you don't need to eat nuts. You don't need a tool to, let's say there's nuts and raisins or something, right? You don't need a tool to separate the nuts from the raisins. So you're not allowed to, let's say you don't like the raisins. You're not allowed to take the raisins out and put them on the side. And then you'll have a whole handful of nuts. That you're not allowed to do. You're only allowed to take what you want, which is the nuts, and eat it. But you can't use a spoon to do that because the spoon is not an extension of your hand, and it's not something wet that you need a utensil. You always eat it by hand. So that would be like a knain v'tamchay. You definitely can't use some sort of sifter to let the nuts drop out, even if that's what you want. Even if it's good from the bad, you can't use the tool. And you also can't do it for later in the day. Say, oh, we're going to have something later today. I'll separate them now. You can't do that. Okay. Kiyasa Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi...
If you simply just didn't have the fork around and you wanted to eat, and the other people are around and they, it's not nice to put your hands into something, so you can...
So if that, then that could be that could be an extension of your hand, if that would be the case. If that would be the case, if that would be the way of eating this food, or could be to put up that sign. The Daf Yomi is not a halacha share. It gets complicated. It depends on the scenarios. Okay. Rav Dimi comes, he says it was the Shabbos of Rav Bibi. Apparently, they would take turns eating at, or serving the food to the people in the yeshiva, I guess. So it was his day to serve the Talmidim. It was his week, or his Shabbos. Ve'ekloi Rabami v'Rabasi. Rabami and Rabasi went to Rav Bibi's house. Shada Kamayo Kalkala de Peri. They had what they call a Peris tish. He threw out a whole basket of fruits. V'lo I don't know why he did this. He put out, Shada doesn't mean, I guess he spread it out. Why didn't he just leave it in the basket and let them take what they wanted? Why do you have to spread it out? Maybe because if it's all in the basket, they would take what they wanted. And he holds that you're not even allowed to do separating from the good from the bad. Maybe that's what he holds. Or maybe he wanted it to look like a lot, and everyone, guys, we have enough of it here, take the whole, and that, so he left it like that. He doesn't know if it was a halachic reason or if it was a reason as trying to be a good host. Was it a Shabbos halacha? That's why he spread it out onto the table, so it should get separated on its own. Whatever psilus was amongst that food. Okay. Chizki Amar Habayr Turmasin Miteich Psilus Shalem Chayev. This is a very interesting halacha. It's different than everything else that we learned. Turmasin are these types of beans that need to be cooked 7 times or something, then they get soft. So if someone separates the turmis from the good from the bad, take the good from the bad, he's chayev. Wow, it goes against everything that we learned. The good from the bad we thought was okay. It must be that he holds the opposite from what we said before. The good from the bad is also. The Gemara says shani turmisin, the shalkalu shiva zimni. Turmisin are different. You have to boil it 7 times. And if you don't take it out, if you don't remove it, misrach, it's going to go bad. There it gets complicated because even the oichel, even what's good, if you leave it in, turns bad. So it's considered the bad from the good already at that stage. That's one pshat. There's other pshatim here. That when you take it out, it squishes and it becomes psilus. I'm not sure exactly what the recommendation is. I don't know what they're saying, how to do it. But they're saying that this case, even though it's not really psilus, but for some reason it's getting a status of psilus of the waste. Okay. Just one point. When it comes to Yom Tov, Tesis mentions this, that Yom Tov, Beirer also has certain restrictions, but the halachas of Beirer on Yom Tov are slightly different than the halachas of Beirer on Shabbos. Selecting. And it depends on the quantity that you have. We take the good from the bad. But if the quantity of the amount of good that you have is much more than the bad, then on Yom Tov, you're not supposed to do it like that, because that's extra work on Yom Tov to take all of that good out. And then it switches the halacha. So on Yom Tov, the halachas of Beirer have one more complexity that needs to be taken into account. Okay, v'hataychen, grinding.
Question before we leave Bora. Are we going to come to a discussion about why Bora applies to things that are not Gedulei Karka?
Oh, that's an interesting. Yeah, I guess the concept of Gedulei Karka is only a restriction where the Gemara says, it's only a limitation where the Gemara says that that's how it works.
That's interesting.
We had Dash, we quoted a Gemara later from Taisva's quotes, and then Ma'amer, our Gemara here says it, and then we'll see other malachas. So, yeah, Beirer applies even to socks, forks and spoons, knives. You can't select them for putting them away or whatever. To pamphlets, if you have pamphlets, magazines or something, you can't select them. This is all types of interesting things. Okay, so now in Chassidus, Beirer is like the malacha that has to do. That's the refinement process of separating the sparks of holiness. Okay. V'hataychen, grinding. Amar of Papa, Haiman the Paris. I'm sorry, Rashi corrects that. It's supposed to be the parim. Someone that cuts into small pieces, silka, beets. He chops them small. S'chai mishum taychen, that's also considered grinding. Grinding is making something that's large smaller. So cutting it into small pieces is grinding. Amar of Menashe, Haiman the Salas silti, chai mishum taychen. Even if he takes a piece of wood and he makes it into splinters, that's also considered teichen. If he's concerned about the size, he's doing it to specific size, then that's considered mechatech. We had a malacha of mechatech, cutting when it came to the leather, to the parchment. Cutting it is a problem. Cutting it to size. Cutting something to size is a problem. That would be where that applies to us would be. I think our paper towels are things that are cut to size. Why is it cut to size? Because that's where the line is. Kireya. Did we have kireya? Kireya. That's tearing in order to sew. Mechatech was not tearing. Mechatech was cutting. In Chabad, there's an extra chumrah of two things that were separated once. And they're put together, not to cut that off. That's why Rabbi Marlow would tell you about the yogurt, that there's a problem to open the yogurt where it's attached. Because originally two separate pieces. And if you tear it right over there, that goes under the category of mechatech. There's a big machlekes of what mechatech really is in halacha. And the Alter Rebbe says that it has to do with things that were once separated that are now glued together or pasted. That's where, I think that's how it works. Okay.
What about cans of soda?
Yeah. That's another issue. We had a discussion about that once. If it's considered making an opening to a keli, now you can use that keli. That's a major machlekes, opening cans of soda. Some people will tell you that it's mamash deraisa, and other people do it without it. It's no problem. That's a big discussion. See, just ask your rabbi. The halash. If now we're up to kneading. Kneading and baking. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, Shavik Tana Didan Bishel Samamanim, the have it b'mishkan, v'nakadaife. I guess he asked the question. What's all the malachas? The malachas are what we did in the Mishkan. The preparation for the Mishkan wasn't a gingerbread, house. It was made from materials, and we needed this process for the dyes, for the coloring. We're not baking bread. We bake bread in the service of the Mishkan, but not in the construction of the Mishkan. So what's going on? So why are you telling me baking? You should tell me cooking, because the dyes were made with a cooking process, not with the baking process. The Gemara says, Tana Didan Sidur de Pasnakat. The Tana is telling us, I guess, for the household, how these malachas are translated into Sidur de Pas, the order of making bread. So that, therefore, it exchanged the way that it was originally done in the Mishkan to tell us what it would mean to us in the household of making bread. So we put in baking instead of cooking. It's the same malacha, baking and cooking, but just the title that it got that wasn't originally in the Mishkan, that's because it's giving us the order of making bread. If someone throws a peg into the oven, he's chayav because of mevashal. We just switched from, could have said oifa. The Gemara says pshita. That's obvious. Apparently, originally the peg was moist, and when you throw it into the oven, it hardens. The Gemara says, maybe you could say that you're only just strengthening it, but there's no cooking or baking process that takes place. Kamash malan, demir farafi v'hadakamet. It's coming to let you know that first it softens, and then it gets hard. There is a cooking process that takes place. It's not just hardening. There's actually something that, let's say, a chemical change. If that would be the term. There's a chemical change here that takes place. That could throw us off because in water, maybe there's also a chemical change if there's bacteria or whatever, things that get lost. I don't know. Amar Rabba Baravuna, Haiman da Artach Kufra Chai Mishum Bavashal. Someone that boils up pitch, tar, is considered Bavashal. The Gemara says Pshita. That's obvious. This is I think maybe because it immediately hardens right after you take it off the fire. So it's not like you changed its characteristic. You didn't really change it. Just temporarily it switched into a liquid. And you take it off, it immediately turns hard, back to the same thing that it started with. So maybe there was no change at all. Kamash malan, that temporary change was considered cooking. Usually you cook something, it doesn't go back to where it started. And something changes. Amar Rava, Haiman da Ovid Chavisa Chayiv Mishum Sheva Chatayis. Okay. You ready? Someone that makes a barrel is Chayiv 7. Rashi goes through the list. The list here, what he's Chayiv 7 malachas if he makes a barrel. Talking about a barrel that's made out of clay, not out of wood. They make the barrels out of wood. Barrels that are made out of wood are these slats that they put them in a ring, and you just put them in, and then you put a ring over it again and then you bend it back, and then rather simple process. Over here, you're making it out of clay. So first you have to grind up the soil into clay. Clay is soil, just more fine. That's grinding. Then you have to separate the pieces that are larger. That's selecting. Then you have to sift it to make it very fine. Sifting. Then you have to mix it together with water. That's kneading. Then you have to smooth it out when you make it into a shape. Okay, that's mamachik, that's smoothing it. Then you have to light a fire. And you have to put it into the oven. Lighting the fire and putting it into the oven is two separate malachas. It's cooking, lighting a fire is lighting a fire, and then cooking. So it comes out to 7. But if you make an oven, there's one more step to that process where you have to smear the oven afterwards with some coating to keep the heat inside. That's a makeh b'patish. Makeh b'patish is the last bang with the hammer. It has a final step that's the last of the that adds an 8th malacha there. Amar Rabbi Hayman David Chalsa Chayiv Mishum Asara Chatois. I'm sorry, Chayiv Achas Esrei Chatois. If he makes chalsa, which is a type of basket that's made out of reeds, he's chayav 11 chatois. V'chayte lepume, and if he puts a lip over it, over the edges, then chayav shalosh esrei chatois. There's an extra 2 that go on to that. So, what are the malachas of making a basket? Well, the first thing is that you have to cut the reeds. That's harvesting. Problem is when you cut the reeds, that's also promoting the growth of it to regrow. So that's naiteya. As we said, zaymer v'tzarich leitzim. If you prune and you need the wood, you chayiv 2. Okay, so that's 2 already. You gather them together. That's ma'amer. So you're up to 3. Then you have to take the good ones. That's 4. Taking the good from the bad. I guess not for eating. So that would be taking the good from the bad. Okay, whatever the case is. I don't know exactly what he's taking. You have to smooth them down. That's smoothing. We're up to 5. You have to cut them up into different pieces. That's going to be grinding. That's 6. You have to cut them to size. That's mechatech. That's 7. Then you start the weaving process. Yeah, because you have to weave these baskets. So the setting up the loom is 8. You have to make heddles. That's 9. And then you do the actual weaving is 10. And then you have to cut it after it's cutting it again. No, that final cutting is not chayav because of cutting. Making it even at the end is the makeh b'patish. Okay, that's the 11. Now, if you're going to add a lip over it, a little hem or a seam over the top, yeah, they're like those baskets. So then you have to.
Doesn't it say that the number 10 is oireg? That it's probably weaving or something. That it's sua haravish.
Right. The 10 would be the weaving of it. Right. Yeah. And then the 11th would be cutting the pieces at the end, make it smooth, make it even. So that would be, even though that's cutting to size, but that we already had cutting before, this is the makeh b'patish. The last one would be sewing and tying. Rashi says that there's no baina here because we don't say there's baina by kalim. There's no construction by kalim. I taught this to my students, so I got these weaving kits, and we did I showed them how to weave. It was baskets, weaving. They made baskets. Anyway, when I was finished, so one of the students tells me, Rabbi, this was a lot of fun. And on Shabbos afternoon, I have so much extra time. This is like a project I'd really like to do Shabbos afternoon. I'm like, no, that's what I... So I'm telling you that you can't do this on Shabbos. Anyway, okay. We're holding shearing the wool, and then...
So we don't get baskets, huh? We're for us.
Oh, for this year?
Yeah.
So I'll get baskets.
Right.
I got
barrels. That'll be better even.
That's right. I got it. It was actually a very good project. Basket weaving, something. They sent me like a whole thing for a class. And you soak the reeds, and then you make these things.
Okay.
The wool, shearing the wool and then whitening it, which is washing it or bleaching it. Amar Rabbi Bar Bachana, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Bar Bachana says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Tevet Tzemer Shel Gabi Behemim B'Shabbos Chayiv Shalish Chatos. If you turn it into strands while it's on the sheep, you chayiv 3 chatos. Even if it's on the sheep. One is because goizes, because then you're going to cut it off when you're done. Rachas mishum menapitz. Other one is that you're combing it. You have to comb it first before you start spinning. Rachas mitayva, another one is spinning. So you're twisting the hairs to spin it. Rav Kana amarin derech gezize bekach v'in derech menapitz bekach v'in derech tavi bekach. Rav Kana says, no, that's all not accurate. No one does that. To spin the thread while it's still attached to the animal, that's such a difficult thing. No one would ever do that. The Gemara says, "V'loi, really? That's not how you do it." For Tanya, Mishmeid Reb Nechemia, but it was taught in the name of Reb Nechemia. Shatef bizim v'tava bizim. This is the work that they did with the goats. And when it says tava bizim, that they spun it on the goats, al matvi al gabi behema, shmei tvia. You see from this brisa that they spun it on the goats. They spun the hair on the goats. This was like an extra trick like that they did. So it says Chachmi Seirashani. That is an extreme talent. That doesn't mean it's normal. Okay, Tanar Rabbanan. Hataylesh as a kanaf, someone that takes a feather. Vahakoitmai, as he cuts off the end. Vahamartai. Martai, I think, means he scrapes it down. Kaitmai is he cuts off the thick part so he can put it. He can put it in the in a pillow. As he cuts off the hard part so it doesn't poke. And Marta is he cuts the hairs off the fibers so that he can put it in the pillow. So there's 3 steps. You take the feather, you cut off the thick part, and then you scrape off the hairs. What's left you give to the cipher. If it's a turkey, probably. No, not a chicken. But chayev shalish chatais. There's 3 chatais there. Amar b'shem ben lakish teilash chayev mishum geizes. When you take the feather out, well, that's like shearing the wool. Kaitem chayev mishum mechatech. Cutting off the thick part of the end that's stuck to the bird. That's mechatech. And memaret, cutting off the fibers, the hairs, is chaim shem memachik, that's smoothing it out. Okay, let's leave it over here for today. Shukayach.